rates and ratios for target versus animal versus self-defense, bullets fired, shooting incidents, etc., success and failure rates. This is going to be a long, messy one because I'm taking information from as far apart as 1960 to this year. I'm collecting the information based on finding average rates and doing my best with it. Like any attempt at statistics in science, especially if I'm doing this armchair style, I have to do the following warning. I do at least as good or as badly, depending on how you look at it, as a news source. I don't get magazine and clip confused. I actually know what the fuck I'm talking about, even though I am, by definition, because I haven't done jack shit in firearms, hunting, self-defense, or target shooting in literally decades. I mean, on a practical level, my standard of you're into this, you're a gun person, I don't meet. Yet I'm doing videos explaining exactly this week, exactly where some of the memes come from, the origin stories, for a lot of things that people take for granted, like, half of all households have guns. No, actually they don't. There's millions of self-defense shootings a year. No, they're not. And I'm not saying that to make guns bad or good. I'm saying people keep rounding up until they rounded the bend. So let's look at statistics in context. 1994, the most common gun owner type, stereotype. This is actually where this comes from. And it's outdated as fuck. College-educated, white male who grew up with guns, who's middle-aged. Those same people are the same ones we have now as the majority of gun owners of that generation. From 1994, these were 40 to 64-year-olds. Now, add the years together. Yeah, they're dead. Okay, so that's not a statistic we should quote, but let's just look up the ratios. 73% of them bought their guns from a store, 20% got them as gifts, the rest were other. 17% only did hunting. 17% did only other sports like clay, target shooting, skeet, whatever. Only 17% did both. Yeah, those are accurate numbers. They're going to overlap. These are statistics, right? Carry the two, divide by 0. And 48% did none of the above. They weren't hunters. They weren't doing sport. They weren't doing both. They were doing neither. That means that a little under half the people in 1994 who had bought a gun, it doesn't matter when, bought them for self-defense. The other, basically half the population, did it for some form of sport. 17% did it for hunting. 17% did it for more than just hunting, which meant that was around 30-some-odd%. There's overlap. How many of them did self-defense and sport and hunting? That would be all of them. The firearm is there. How many of them, well, how can you say that? Well, here we go. 38% of households kept a gun, not 50%. 25% of adults owned firearms, which meant, because of the numbers, some of them had, if you took them all average, they had 4 firearms each and could outfit the entire population of the United States with 1 firearm and a box of ammo. 20% had a handgun, 36% had long guns, 40% had both. So, out of the estimated 25% of adults that owned a firearm in 1994, let's say 12%, 10% of the population had both a firearm that was long and a handgun. The handgun was primary self-defense. You notice the 40% mark? Yeah, that also accounts for 48% of them were holding firearms, most of them handguns, for self-defense because it's the most effective weapon for self-defense. Period, full stop, except under certain circumstances. All in all, that's why police carry a handgun. They also have shotguns for those special environments. That's the secondary kind, right? Here we go. 26% had shotguns. 36% had a rifle. 34 had handguns. But 40% of them had both. And about 50% almost were doing this almost exclusively for self-defense. The other half were a mixed bag of literally all of it. 80% of handguns were 10-round capacity or less, actually under, and had long barrels and were California compliant. In 1990s, most firearms were Californicated. You could also get what we would call assault rifles or weapons, but the majority of it, like a mind mashing a number of them, which is the reason people didn't really care if you outlawed literally a machine gun that was made into a sporterized version. The majority of firearms were California compliance. Basically, California wants everything to go back to the 1990s. They do not like the idea of me making a oxyacetylene-powered hand cannon that's a 73 caliber 12-gauge handgun that's semi-auto because I'm going to use a flare cartridge that's only been seen in movies to be used by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was used to light a bunch of crap on fire. Yeah, it was flare gun. Yes, I'm still a little miffed about not having a fully metal flare gun. I'll have a video about that later. 2016, 11 million people went hunting in the United States. In 2020, it was 15 million. They harvested 22,000 elk, or 24,000 mule deer, or 25,000 whitetails. The success rate is cited as 25% for elk and or mule deer, and 44% for whitetail because they're easier to hunt, I guess. Before 1990, you had an average of 3 to 7 shots per deer to get one. That's on crowded hunts. 2 in more open states. So I'm averaging that at 5 shots each. For 2020, the 72,434 total deer results in 362,000 bullets being fired on average, or 100,000 fired. I'm just going to round it up, just for hunting in 1 year. So we have 100,000 shots fired trying to get a deer. I didn't include every other kind of hunt because statistics on this stuff are hard to find because a lot of hunters won't admit they didn't get everything on the first shot. Hunters are like fishermen. Enough said. Let's just use that number and divide by 0. So here we go. Yearly average of 100,000 shootings a year seems like a really convenient rounded up quote, don't it? How often are shootings done with more than one shot? As the joke goes, if you're involved in a self-defense shooting and you only fired once, it probably wasn't self-defense. But it usually is. One shot on average. Some people fired plenty of rounds. Other people just showed the firearm. But it was declared a shooting because they didn't actually shoot at the person. It was a negligent discharge that scared away their attacker. Excluding air and gas-powered BB and pellet guns or high-powered PCP 50 caliber hunting air rifles, police-related shootings in self-inflicted, unintentional, or undetermined intent gun injuries in 2020. There were 45,000 firearms-related deaths, 18,000 were homicides, 27,000 were self-inflicted death. Now that's homicides. 18,000 homicides in a year, 2020, versus around 100,000 bullets fired for a hunt season. And remember, our average here for self-defense only, 48% for usage of a firearm. We can easily assume for self-defense we're not firing as many times as we would at a target. So target shooting and clay shooting, good God, skeet shooting, is going to have a ridiculously large number of shots fired. But it would be about the same as the number of shots if you added them up for if you had over half of the gun owners doing it for self-defense, right? Well, no. Let's actually look at shootings. Firearm suicide rates are highest among people 75 years of age and older. They're ending their life because of usually medical reasons, terminal cancer or whatever, and they want to save money for their family, or they've run out of money and they know that they won't get any treatment. As I get older, I understand this. 80%, 86% of the deaths of firearms in general were men. 87% of non-fatal firearm injuries are male as well. This is primarily a middle-aged white male, in the old days, upper educated person who can afford to keep and maintain a firearm, and also us idiots on the bottom of the level that will just make our own firearms and are not statistics you have records of. It's not ghost guns, it's PO asses. 70% of firearm injury survivors were from assaults, 20% were unintentional firearm injuries, self-inflicted or otherwise, and 10% are listed as other. Most people who are harmed by a firearm are from being involved in an assault case. Sometimes it's them getting shot when trying to defend themselves. Civilian urban area gun users were 4 times as likely to be shot in an assault as an unarmed person because they didn't think, I can use my gun. They thought, I have no option, I have to run away. False bravery. The odds increased to 5.5 times as often if the victim had at least some chance to resist. If you have no chance to resist, you're going to run away whether or not you have a firearm. Running away and getting behind cover is more effective than standing there like Rambo and shooting. Learn how to defend your life, not your property. Sorry, but I have an opinion about this. A gun at the time of an assault did not protect those who possessed them from being shot. But what are the percentage of occurrences that are called firearms self-defense cases? News articles about incidents of firearm self-defense, which may or may not be factually useful, 2019 versus hospital cases. Victims fired the firearm in 90% of all incidents if they had a firearm. This is only firearms occurrences where a firearm was involved and self-defense was occurring, not necessarily successful. 90% of the time, the person defending themselves fired. Perpetrator was armed half the time with a gun. They could have been armed with something else, but half the time it was a gun. Victim was shot 25% of the time. And 20% of them died, or 5% out of all incidents involving a gun. That's really lousy rate. Instead of running and hiding, which had different statistics, but they're not in this particular study I'm citing. Perpetrator was shot in 75% of the incidents. Half of them died. 35% death rate from an incident involving a firearm total for a perpetrator, whether they're armed or not, whether you're armed or not. Yes, this includes people shooting them with their own gun after beating them with a baseball bat. The most common successful incident was using not a firearm, but, quote, shelving, and then shooting them with their own gun. The majority of these were home invasions and or burglaries that were involved. The majority of cases may or may not also include escalations. Firearms are used more often to intimidate than in self-defense or as self-defense. Guns are used more often to intimidate your family members in your own home, not to thwart a crime. Most purported self-defense cases are actually just arguments that escalated to the point that the person would be charged with a felony and not justifiable, not self-defense. Criminals almost always go to the hospital when they're shot. These statistics are not hidden. Very few criminals are shot by decent law-abiding citizens because going to a hospital and then going to jail is better than going not to hospital and ending up in the morgue. You can read the rest of the statistics and data below if you like. What does this account for? How many shots fired at deer versus targets? Targets are more likely to be hit, deer second, and people almost dead last. And you're more likely to get hurt if you actually use a gun in an incident rather than running away and just making sure you have decent insurance on theft and break-in insurance. Or be Poe, have nothing to steal, and hide what you got that you need. Or take it with you. Make everything fit in a backpack and drag it out the building when you run away. Fuck the building. Keep your life. Anyway, that's what I got. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. Agree with me or disagree? Post below in the comments.